Attention comedy musicians and comedy music fans, the Logan Awards are taking open nominations for outstanding comedy songs and videos released last year for this year's awards. Did you release a comedy song or music video in 2022, or have a favorite comedy song or video that was released then? Then nominate it for the Logan Awards today. The Logan Awards are essentially the Comedy Music Awards, sponsored annually by the Funny Music Project and are presented in 3 categories: Outstanding Original Comedy Song, Outstanding Parody Song, and Outstanding Comedy Music Video. If you have a comedy song that was released in 2022 that you'd like to nominate for 2023's awards, head to LoganAwards.com and click the nominations tab at the top. There is a minimum and maximum of 5 nominations per person. Hurry! Nominations close this year on June 30th. For more details about Logan himself, the awards, and more, check out LoganAwards.com. Help us commemorate the year's best comedy songs and music videos with a trophy, the way they do with every other form of entertainment. But if you want your favorites to win, you have to nominate them by June 30th. Get your nominations in now at LoganAwards.com, brought to you by thefump.com.
I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday, and welcome to our Pride episode. That's right, it is LGBT plus Pride Month, and we are celebrating Queer Pride. And that's our first disclaimer right there off the bat. I personally use the term queer to refer to myself, or bisexual, or whatever. So if you hear that term on the show, it is a reclaimed term of pride. And if you're upset by that, sorry, but I don't care. So there you go.
Heterosexual male here. I'm just along for the ride.
Yeah, no. Good ally. Good allyship over there in the other corner. But this time we have chosen as our Pride episode what people have called the most LGBT positive thing to come out of Disney possibly ever, which is the Owl House.
Yeah, this has been a big recommendation for us from a lot of people, and we've been saving it just for this.
Yeah, so just so you know, as a spoiler thing, we're only going to be talking about season 1 as far as plot spoilers. So just season 1 for the context of this episode. However, there will be spoilers about the sexuality and gender identity of various characters that may not be talked about in season 1 exactly. So some relationships or sexual identities might come up that are not revealed until later. But as far as just plot stuff, we're only going to be talking about season 1. But we are kind of focusing more on the queer representation of the Owl House, and then the plot of season 1, because that is what we watched. This was a first watch for both of us. For this show. This was not a rewatch for either of us. Even though it had come highly recommended, it was one that we hadn't gotten around to yet. So this was a first watch for both of us for this show. So you're basically getting our first impressions of Owl House in this. And then our reaction to how they handled queer representation, mainly within the first season, because we've really not gone beyond that in our watching yet. So that's what you're going to get in this episode. There's all your spoiler warnings and context for that.
So if we bring up any questions and your internet goes, that was answered in season 2, that was answered in season 3, we don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. We haven't gotten that far yet. So yeah, if we're like, oh, I hope they get into that later, and they do, good. We don't know. We haven't seen it yet. But let's talk about kind of how the show got developed, and also how the show ended up getting canceled, because honestly, that is also a fascinating story that has to do mostly with the queer content of the show.
And changing of regimes at a lot of divisions in Disney at the same time.
Yeah, and it's stuff we have covered on the show before in the context of other queer media at Disney. Because we talked about this when we talked about Strange World. Mm-hmm. And how it kind of got screwed over in the marketing.
And that movie's kind of gotten back into the news recently. Oy.
Yeah, it has. And the thing is that we talked about before, when Iger was in charge, he greenlit a lot of projects, just kind of in his... And I don't want to make it sound like he sat there and literally was like, yes, do that show, yes, do that show. But the CEO of a corporation does kind of set the culture as to what is allowed and what is not.
The thing is, Disney is a big company and also is a huge financial backer in terms of donations to politicians. Iger being such a pro-gay ally that he would pressure politicians, threatening to take away his donations from their campaigns if they didn't come out and being in favor for gay marriage, specifically the Obama administration.
Yeah, he was really big on pressuring Obama during his term to change from like, well, I'll leave it up to the states, to being like, no, we should have like a national referendum on that. So Iger, in his term at the company, was kind of seeing more movement in allowing gay representation in Disney products. And we've talked about it before. It wasn't great. Okay, it wasn't where it should have been, but it was getting there.
Disney, the quote Disney gay.
Yeah. So he was greenlighting things, or allowing things to be greenlit, like Strange World, like The Owl House, and everything.
LeFou being gay in the Beauty and the Beast remake, stuff like that.
Yeah, things like that were happening. It was small, but it was movement. And then Iger leaves, and he's replaced with Chapek. Now, Chapek was the opposite. He was maybe not outwardly hostile, but he definitely was not an ally. So all of a sudden, things that had been seeing movement were getting canceled or not going backwards. The idea was that the creator of Owl House, her name is Dana Terrace.
No stranger to Disney.
Yeah,
she's worked on Gravity Falls, the Rapunzel animated series, the 2017 DuckTales reboot, Amphibia, and Mitchell's vs. the Machines.
She has said publicly, without naming names, that even though Owl House was getting good ratings and everything was going very well, that suddenly one guy at Disney decided that the Owl House was not, quote, in the Disney brand anymore.
And that's not the first time such a thing has been said about a show on a children's network. Granted, it's not the same thing, but when I heard that, I got instantly reminded of Young Justice on Cartoon Network. Young Justice, very good ratings, very good reviews, but the show was attracting an older audience. Older teenagers, young adults, and even adults in the 20s, 30s, and 40s who were watching this show and saying, hey, this is actually a pretty good show. Good writing, good, overarching storylines, blah, 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 blah. And Cartoon Network canceled it, even though it was getting good ratings and getting good reviews, because it was attracting the wrong audience for their network. If you weren't ages 6 to 12, they didn't want you. And in a way, the Owl House was also similar in that it was attracting an older demographic. It wasn't just little kids watching the show. It was teenagers and young adults and people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who were watching the show. Granted, it was during the pandemic and there really wasn't much new stuff coming out. It's possible that it was attracting, quote, the wrong audience. The LGBTQ representation in the show, it could be that certain people didn't like those people be watching their show, watching their network. But that's just me.
Yeah. And so even though Dana Terrace has not specifically said this was Bob Chapek saying this, kind of everyone who knows anything about Disney is assuming it was Bob Chapek because the timeline works out. The Owl House is not the only thing that kind of got the same treatment and the same message that you are not our brand.
And I just mentioned
right about the same time. Yeah.
Amphibia.
Yeah, and like we said before, even though Strange World was already finished and headed for release, suddenly there's no marketing for it. There's no press. We follow Disney so closely and we didn't even know when it was coming out. It does seem like if it had not been for the change of leadership at Disney, this show would have continued.
But it's also another change in that practically, at least when it comes to the Disney Channel, I am specifically referring to the Disney Channel, any show that had individual episodes and no overarching storyline was getting renewed. Hell, Phineas and Ferb just got renewed, and it is a pure episodic television show. So
yeah, that is the other thing about the Owl House is that it does have a continuing storyline. You can't just drop into a random episode.
Which is why we're watching the entire season and not just a few episodes.
Yeah, we were going to just do some episodes here and there, and then we got into it and realized you can't do that with this one. And although, it's not like when we watched Clone
Wars
and there's a little handy dandy recap at the beginning of the episode that's like, in case you missed the last one, kids. Like, no, it's like you have to be watching this. So it's very good for binging, but you cannot just drop in and out, which for a traditional terrestrial television station, not great, but for a streaming service, brilliant. Because that's how you get people watching.
We say this as Disney Plus has removed several shows from their library.
Oh my goodness, the Disney Vault has reared its ugly head again, and everyone is hating it. I saw a tweet, side note here, but I'm going to go with it. I saw a tweet from Kristen Shaw asking, it was kind of a hypothetical question, I think, but it made me so sad because she was saying, does anybody know how to record from a streaming service onto a DVD because they're removing a show she was on, the Mysterious Benedict Society. And she doesn't have any other access to it. And she was like, I want to know how to be able to show this thing that I'm a part of, that I'm very proud of, to my own kids someday, and they're a little too young for it. And, I mean, we've talked before how we know that so well because it's happened to friends of ours.
Yeah.
You know, that they've just watched their work disappear because some douchebag CEO is like, remove that.
Not getting the views we want, get rid of it.
Yeah, and now it's happening to, you know, and it's so sad to watch people go like, well, you know, and they've never put it out on physical media. They're probably never going to. And this is why I will always say that saving your favorite media is always the ethical choice. But back to Owl House. I am going to put up a mild trigger warning here. There is no way to talk about the Owl House without occasionally mentioning Harry Potter. And I'm sorry about that, because I don't want to give that any more oxygen right now. But Owl House is, in some ways, a reaction to Harry Potter in a way of, we are trying to reclaim this space for all the people who felt rejected by what the author has become. And it is very obvious if you watch the show. So I want to go out and point out now that while the queer themes of Owl House grow in how obvious they are throughout the series, this is not a case of retconning as it was in Harry Potter. And while some of the characters are only officially recognized for their sexuality outside the text, this is also a case of them being canceled prematurely and those storylines not being allowed to play out. Dana Terrace was very, very open with both Disney and her writers, her staff, and the actors portraying the characters as to what the sexuality and gender identity of their characters were from the beginning. So even if it was never brought up in the show, she was open with everyone that these were created to be various forms of LGBT whatever characters. So if we refer to a character as having a specific sexuality or gender identity, and you've seen the show and you're like, well, I'm not sure I specifically got that, it's because the creator and the actors portraying it and the writers of the show have said, no, we did that from the outset. That was what we had in mind. And a lot of times they have said, we never got around to that story or being able to say that outright because we got a truncated, runtime. Because if you're not familiar with the Owl House, they were told they were canceled, they fought back, and the third season was 3 44-minute episodes to wrap up basically everything they had ever planned for the show. So
an entire 20-ish episode season has to be condensed into 3 hours.
I mean, that could have been multiple seasons of story. We don't even know.
It's possible.
But, Yeah, they had to come up with an ending for their entire world.
I believe there is a time skip at the end, which would have put them a couple of seasons ahead if they had continued.
Yeah. But they had to fight to get even that. So there was a lot of interpersonal stuff that was cut. And we can kind of get into that as we talk more about the characters specifically. But the creator has talked about it at length. The writers have talked about it, and the actors have talked about, in a lot of cases, like, oh yeah, no, that was brought up to me, like, from the outset. So this isn't like the author of Harry Potter just tweeting out on a whim years later, oh yeah, I always meant that character to be gay, I just never got around to it. Like, no. This was planned and baked in from the beginning. And you can find it in, interviews and everything else.
And a lot of the Owl House is based off Dana Terrace's own journey through her own sexuality, because she is a bisexual woman and basing this fantasy world on her discovering herself.
Yeah. She identifies as bisexual. She has based a lot of the characters on her own friends or relatives who are from various sexualities or gender identities. She is a strong supporter of the trans community. So she has basically put her friends and family into this series. And that is what she was doing. And she fought with Disney, even under Iger, who was much more accepting, to have these themes in her show. And it was very impressive what she was able to do. So it was just such a shame that in the transition of the short, brutal run of Chapek, that, this was one of the things that kind of ended up being on the chopping block. So let's kind of get into what the series is about.
Yeah, so we got our main character, Luce, and Luce, cisgender male, but I'm also Latino. So we have a Latina main character. We have Luce, who is very much into the young adult fantasy novels, and she gets a little too excited when talking about them. She's a little extra. I think saying that she's a little extra is shortchanging her.
Yeah.
She's a lot extra. And
she's super duper extra, and we love her for it.
Yeah, I mean, she's going very well, and we start the series of her doing a book report on her young adult fantasy novel with props and fireworks to simulate the explosions in the book, which gets her in trouble at school.
When I was watching that kind of opening scene of Luce in school, I was like, oh my god, this is so me. This is what it was like living with me as a kid, wasn't it? Because I never brought like fireworks or anything to school, but that, like, I have all the props for my book report was so me as a kid. Oh my goodness, I was so extra with every one of my book reports. Like, I had sound effects, I had like puppet shows, I had like, oh my goodness. Like, little Kiki with her book reports was an entire show and a half. Oh my god.
Yeah, and this gets her in trouble in school, and to the point where her mother is saying, I'm getting tired of your extraness. I'm going to send you to summer camp so you can be normal.
Oh my goodness, what was the name of the camp? Because it was so depressing. Camp reality check. That's what it was. It was camp reality check.
Fit in the box.
Oh my God.
No. Think inside the box.
Think inside the box. Oh.
So yeah, it's a camp where you send a nonconformist to convert them into normality.
Convert. Yeah.
Like that is just slugging the point into your head.
Yeah. I mean, good on you, Dana, but oh, that hurt. Yeah, and it's so sad because, the series kind of opens with, I mean, the mom is very loving. We got nothing against the mom because it is a really good portrayal of this. I mean, we don't know what happened to her dad, but she's just living with the single mom. The mom's trying her best and all, but Luz just feels so bad, and you see her like cleaning out her room of all her favorite things so she can try to be the good girl.
Yeah, her mom is pretty much telling her to throw away her life. Everything that makes her is in this box that her mom is telling her to put in the trash can so she can go to camp to be normal.
Like all her little, dragon sculptures and her favorite fantasy book, which is about a witch. I mean, big Harry Potter YA vibes,
Yeah.
And I mean, she's got it all in this box and she's putting it in the trash. And I was like, I wanted to cry at the...
You want to give this kid a hug.
Yeah, I was like, I wanted to hug her and be like, it's okay, you'll find your tribe, oh.
Go to a convention, kid, you'll find your people.
Yeah, I know.
That's how we found each other. Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, poor baby. Yeah.
And things go south when we see the character that would eventually be known as Albert grabbing Luz's belongings and taking it to this old shack to give to his master, Ida the Owl Lady. And Luz follows Albert into this glowing door and into the world of the Boiling Isles, a series of islands made from the carcass of a dead titan. That because the titan was magical, all living beings that were born on that island also receive magical abilities. Definitely, and it's definitely when she finds out that she's on the Boiling Isles, it's definitely a "we're not in Kansas anymore" Toto moment.
I mean, it's very much Lion Witch in the Wardrobe kind of feel. You step through the magical doorway and here you are in the
magical fantasy land.
Yeah.
And she loves it because she can finally get to live out her fantasy, the fantasies that she'd been reading in her young adult magic novels. And she learns very quickly that, yeah, this, quote, reality is not like the novels. Like, in the next episode, she straight up gets the Chosen One quest from this wizard that all goes wrong. Like, every trope of the Chosen One hero's journey all crumbled up in this 22-minute episode. And she has to learn the hard way that there is no Chosen One. There is no savior of the masses kind of deal. And she's gotta, she can't wait for her destiny to come to her. Ida even tells her she has to form her own destiny.
Well, let's go back to that first episode real quick because, she gets caught up in Ida's, little thing. She finds out that Ida is the most wanted criminal on the island for not conforming. It's an authoritarian government under the emperor, and Ida is basically breaking all the rules. And you find out over the course of the season that it's like you have to be in one specific track of magic. And when, that's under a coven. So there are like 9 covens, and you have to pick whether you want to use like plant magic or fire magic or, potions or whatever. Abominations. Yeah. And so this is kind of, once again, a reaction about the Harry Potter house system. They even make jokes about the sorting hat.
Yeah. Isn't there an easy way don't you have a magic piece of clothing that can decide for me? Yeah, we did. It didn't go well, and it started eating students.
Yeah. So, I mean, they make a lot of jokes about the ridiculousness of the Harry Potter world, but they also show the horribleness of that system, of the like decide who you are at your teenage years. Luce is supposed to be like 13 or 14 or something.
Come around there.
And her peers are supposed to be a similar age, when we meet her eventual friends. It's very much a decide who you're going to be before your brain is even fully formed, which is such a great it's such a great commentary on how we do things
in the real world.
Yeah. I used to know someone who had a job in a relatively new field, and they used to say to me, that they thought it was so cruel that teachers and whatever would ask them, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because the job they eventually ended up doing literally did not exist when they were that age. It had not been invented yet. So how could they see what they were going to be doing when they were in their 30s or 40s? Because the technology did not exist for what would be their eventual career. That at least is kind of one thing you can say. But also, like, people just change. Most of us can say, hopefully, at least, that we are not the same person we were at 14, that we are at 30, or that we are at 40. Mm-hmm. So to sit a kid down and be like, hey, you have to decide by the time you graduate high school what you want to do with your entirety of your life until retirement, if you even get retirement, is really sick. Yeah. And I love the way this show portrays that, because it's like, you have to pick a coven, and when you do, they literally lock the ability to do every other type of magic except the one your coven does away from you. So if you choose abominations, they put a spell on you that says you can't do potions anymore.
You can't do plant-based magic or illusion-based magic.
Yeah. And it's like, once you have this job, for better or worse in terminology, they magically take away the ability for you to ever switch careers. It's like,
the only way to use all forms of magic is to be in the Emperor's Coven.
Yeah, and you're basically, again, real world terms, you're basically a cop or in the military. You work directly for the Emperor. And they say in that world that when the Emperor came to power 50 years before the show is set, that he said that it was evil, basically, and wrong and against nature for people to be using all forms of magic, and that he alone had that right.
Because he speaks to the Titan.
Yeah, because he can speak to the Titan, so basically, I speak to God, and therefore I am able to have all that power, and everybody else has to do what I say. Boy, does this sound familiar.
Yeah, we're just not subtle at all.
Yeah, this is not a subtle show in its framing here. And so he sets up this authoritarian government, and anyone who doesn't agree with him is sent to the Conformatorium. Again, not a subtle show. In that first episode, we see that Ida gets arrested and sent to the conformatorium, and Luz wants to break her out. And in doing so, Luz sees a bunch of other people that have been sent to the conformatorium for ridiculous things, like writing fanfic about vegetables.
Or a demon that eats its own eyes.
Yeah. And which, by the way, those two characters, the
come back, yeah.
Well, but they're also voiced by our Magisword's buddies, Gray Griffin and Aaron Hansen, who were both in Magiswords. So Magiswords, shout out, yay! And they both voice several characters throughout the show. Aaron ends up voicing the what's the little demon, the Snaggleback or whatever, that shows up in a couple episodes and ends up playing the Grom
Disco Ball.
But yeah, he shows up in quite a lot of episodes, as does Gray, who does a lot of background voices throughout the season and series in general. But Luz says what is basically the overarching theme of the series, which is that us weirdos need to stick together. And that is right there in the first episode, and it keeps showing up throughout the first season, and I think it probably just comes up throughout the series from what I've heard. That's basically the point of the series, is that weirdos have to stick together.
Before we get going, now that we have this point, I want to talk about, just for a moment, my favorite character in this show so far, King of Demons. First name King, last name of Demons.
King is the best. Oh my goodness.
The fact that there's no King plushie is heartbreaking, because I want a King plushie, and I want to sit him next to Grogu, and I want these two to cause chaos.
Yes. I mean, just the best. The absolute best. So much amazing energy from this little dude. It is really cool because he is voiced by the creator of Gravity Falls,
Alan Hirsch, who at this time was in a relationship with Dana Terrace.
Oh, I didn't know that. But but Alex Hirsch voices King and Hootie as well. Hootie is the
door.
the door and the basic spirit of the Owl House itself. But King is just the absolute best. I don't really know if you can say enough about just how the best he is, because everything about him is just a vibe.
He is chaos incarnate, and I love him for it. Like, he wants to rule, and then he has no idea how to rule, and then he just bow before me, cretin, while also trying to figure out these feelings he feels for Ida and Luz. That he does care about these characters. But also
he wants belly rubs and snacks.
So he is a cat.
I mean, he's got more like dog energy, I think. He's kind of like a little bit of both. Like, he's got the, like, I want you all to bow before me energy of a cat, but then he also wants snuggles and treats and belly rubs like a dog. Like, he's just kind of the best of both worlds, you know?
I am king and queen, best of both things.
Yes. They get arrested in the first episode because they're trying to get his crown back, and then you find out, like, it's just a Burger King paper crown.
And Ida even knows this, but, you know, the crown is that important to King, and she does care for King, so she wants to make him happy.
Yeah. It's just the best, and he's just such a cute little baby. But
call him a baby.
but he'd get mad and squeal at you if you called him a baby.
The squeal actually done by Dana Terrace.
It's so cute though.
When he gets mad, he does this little squeal, and that squeal is Dana Terrace doing that squeal.
And it's also Ida's favorite thing in the world. that squeal. She absolutely loves it, and it makes her laugh. But yeah, he is absolutely the best thing. And if you love cute animal sidekick characters, King will immediately be your favorite thing in the world, and a reason alone to watch this show.
Luz is a dress away from being a Disney princess, you're saying.
I mean, kind of, yeah. But the cool thing about Luz, okay, if we're going to talk about like queerness in this show, the cool thing about Luz is that Luz is the Disney princess who doesn't wear a dress. Like, she has a feminine enough style, but her main outfit in the show is like jean shorts and a hoodie and all. But when she dresses formally, like in the Grom episode, it's kind of half masculine, half feminine.
Yeah, she's got a tuxedo top and a tutu.
And leggings.
Yeah.
So it is a feminine style, but it's a very genderqueer kind of feminine style. It's slightly more androgynous, which I like because I also kind of like those kind of styles personally for myself, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very bisexual energy. So, you know, with like Luz being canonically bisexual, it's like, yes, that fits very much with bisexual energy. It's like, please go off, queen. I love you.
Like in the second episode, she talks about meeting a love interest, and there's this masculine, muscular boy that she kind of fawns over. But by the end, she does end up with a girlfriend.
Yeah, and it's fine because you see her talk kind of equally in fantasy about like, well, you know, there's this prince in the books and whatever, and she does kind of default, like when she first talks to Amity, who, spoiler alert, you know, that's her eventual girlfriend in the show. When she first talks to Amity, she kind of defaults to, oh, you know, you probably think he's hot or whatever. Like, she just assumes a heteronormative thing out of Amity because, yeah, that's kind of what you do in the world. You know, most people you're going to meet are probably going to be heterosexual. So, you know, it's like, here's Amity, the popular girl. She's probably straight, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then, spoiler alert, no, Amity's lesbian, you know? So it's rather fascinating how that kind of develops because, yeah, when we see Luz in that quest you were talking about, the Chosen One quest, where it turns out that she's being tricked by a demon that wants to eat her and live off of her fantasies and whatever. So when that demon crafts that fantasy, it is an extremely heteronormative Chosen One fantasy. You're a girl, you must want the big, strong prince. And so it's the big, strong prince, you know, with the six-pack abs and the, here, let me take my shirt off for you, you know? I mean, yeah, it does work because
she's into it.
She's into it, you know? It's like she is also into men, you know? But it is interesting that that's what the demon pulls from as the first go, you know? And it is a really interesting commentary on that's the Chosen One narrative. Oh, you go, you save the world, and your reward is an opposite gender partner. Luz breaks that by choosing the chosen family at the end of that. You know, she has the ability to stay in the fantasy and be the chosen one and have the prince and, you know, and instead she breaks that and goes to her chosen family of Ida and King, which is the choice that a lot of queer people have to make. Like, do you choose the heteronormative fantasy where you... And, you know, for bisexual people, it's also a little more fraught, because if a bisexual person ends up in a hetero-seeming relationship, we have the opportunity to hide almost and deny, like, you know, well, I mean, look at me.
And there's also blast back from that community, you know, or you're not a real gay because you married a man or you married a woman.
Yeah.
We have bisexual friends that did end up in heteronormative marriages, and they had to fight to be seen that like that, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, it happens all the time just because that's statistically the way it works out, you know? If you're open to a straight-seeming relationship and you're open to a gay-seeming relationship, statistically, most of your partners are probably going to end up, you know. So the thing is, though, is that she does have the ability to just kind of play out this fantasy of like, oh, look, I'm the normal, special, chosen one person. Or she can go back to this kind of messy, chosen family dynamic. And it's a harder life, but it's the true life.
Mm-hmm.
And right from the start, Luz is like, no, I don't want the fantasy. I thought I wanted the fantasy, but the messy reality is a lot better.
And this plays up later on when she's in that wizard duel with Amity. Ida wants to cheat, but Luz doesn't want to cheat. She wants to win it with her own skills, even though she cannot produce magic naturally like the witches can.
Yeah, they say that the witches' magic on the Isles comes from literally a gland that grows on their heart that produces like a magical substance that lets them interact with the magic on the island. And Luz, being a human, does not have this gland. So Luz, in a really fascinating thing, discovers that she can draw glyphs on paper and tap them, and they produce magic. And over the course of the season, she discovers she can kind of combine them in different ways, and they do different things.
Yeah, and it's considered a lost art among the witches because, again, it's been 50 plus years. Ida does say that there used to be an old way for witches to do magic prior to just using this gland in their bodies, but it's a lost art. It's forgotten, and Luz is rediscovering this lost art by writing the glyphs. She first sees the glyph by using her phone to record Ida performing magic, and then she pauses it just at the right time to see a glyph in her magic spell. And throughout at least this first season, she starts seeing glyphs in various parts of the island. Like, she sees a snowflake and there's a glyph in it. She sees a plant and there's a glyph in it. And she starts writing, drawing these glyphs to do different magical abilities. So she can do magic. It's just going to have to be a different way. And it's a nice way to kind of have that representation of, I guess, a learning disability. Yeah, you can learn to do the same things just in a different way.
Yeah, a lot of people read Luz as an ADHD character, which, as someone with ADHD myself, does kind of hit right for me.
Mm.
I'm not sure if that was intentional on the part of the creators or what, but it does seem like an interesting disability accommodation,
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can still do the thing that other people do. You just need a, some kind of extra tool, assistive device.
Yeah. Mean, it's even to the point where we're going to be talking about it in a minute, but Principal Bump of the Magic School is impressed that a human can use drawing magic, which he has never seen before.
Yeah, so it's really fascinating that there are moments of outright disability representation in the show as well, but this is kind of a more subtle version of disability representation. I have watched a few episodes into season 2, and there are other characters that become disabled that eventually have to they become magically disabled, and they eventually have to use Luz's way of doing magic. And so it becomes a more obvious disability analogy further into the series. But it is, at least for Luz, it is like being born with a disability compared to the rest of the people on the island. Like you were born without the particular, anatomy to do a specific thing. So here is your assistance device. And it is fascinating the way that they use it, and that the way that Luz is able to figure out a way for her to be equal to the power level of a lot of the other characters.
Mm-hmm. So we mentioned it. Let's talk about Magic School. Hexside School for witches and demons, where Luz meets her friends, Willow, Gus, and Amity. Yeah, Willow and Gus are kind of the outcast, Willow especially. She is a late bloomer with her magic. They call her half a witch because she can't do certain types of magic, and the magic she can do is not good.
And we very quickly find out that the reason she's not good at magic is because she's been put in the wrong track.
Yep.
Her parents want her to be in Abomination's magic, and she is a plant magic witch.
So yeah.
That's it. That's it. That's the only thing. And very, very quickly she is allowed, although it's very difficult. She has to fight for her right to party with plants, but she is the worst student in the Abominations track. Everybody makes fun of her. She's failing every course. But after an incident where she's helping Luz, and the principal sees her use plant magic to a level that most people can't, he allows her to go into the plant magic track instead.
She switches majors.
Yeah, she switches majors, and she becomes the star student in that track because she has a natural affinity for that type of magic.
And at least in the beginning parts of the season, her biggest bully is her former friend Amity. As we learned that Amity and Willow were childhood friends, but because of Willow's lack of ability in Abomination's magic, in Willow's lack of Abomination's magic, Amity is kind of... Originally, we are led to believe that she voluntarily gives up her friendship with Willow because she is a blight. Amity Blight. She is a blight, and blights only associate with the higher-ranked witches and not the low-class trash. But then as the season goes on, we learn that it wasn't her call. She has very manipulative parents that force her to end that friendship. Either you end that friendship, or we're going to make sure she never gets into school and never becomes a full witch. And Amity also gets bullied by her older siblings,
who are much better than her at magic. We find out that Amity works very, very hard to be as good as she is, but she is not really as skilled as everyone thinks. She spends a lot of time in her off time practicing and practicing with a practice wand.
Yeah, we never see magic wands anywhere else at least in this season. So it is assumed that using magic with wands is kind of frowned upon, maybe socially, since all of the witches we see are just drawing a circle with their finger in the air and that becomes magic. So Amity, in order to learn new spells, needs a training wand to help her learn those spells before she can do it without the wand.
Yeah, and apparently the wands are so powerful at channeling magic, or they have magic inside them somehow, that even Luz can use one. So apparently they contain magic in themselves, and they don't pull magic from the witch directly.
And they're battery powered.
Yeah, they have something on the side that looks like a battery thing, but it is really funny. But these characters of Willow and Amity, I gotta tell you, I was told to watch this show because it's like, oh, the main character is bisexual and she ends up with a girlfriend that she meets at magic school. And you get introduced to Willow and Amity at the same time, basically.
Along with Gus.
Well, Gus shows up just a few scenes later, but that first scene, Luz runs into Willow in the forest, and Amity, she sees Willow and Amity interacting as Amity bullies Willow. And I immediately had the thought of Luz should end up with Willow because Willow is the better character.
That's what I thought.
They're probably going to make her end up with the skinny, pretty bully.
Yeah, that.
And that's what they end up doing. That's who ends up being her girlfriend. I mean, they end up showing like, well, she's not really a bully because she's like forced into it. But it's like, okay, that's an explanation, but it's not necessarily an excuse.
You and I are on the same wavelength here. I was thinking the same thing watching this show, and it's like they try their best to make Amity a sympathetic character, but at the same time, she doesn't really stop the bullying until like after Grom.
Yeah, she spends most of the first season, even after you start understanding where she's coming from and that she's bending to social expectation from her parents and everything, and she'll walk up to the Luz and be like, hey, I'm sorry, I was a real coward in there, I should have said something. And it's like, okay, you're doing the wrong thing, and you're still doing the wrong thing.
And you're still hanging around with your mean girl friends. And
it's like, screw off, girl.
Yeah,
what is the use of you?
I'm the same way. It's like they want to make Amity a sympathetic character, but it's like, no.
And the entire time, here is adorable. I mean, this girl is so cute. There's like adorable Willow, who is like super talented, super cute, super funny.
Has a lot in common with Luz.
Has so much in common with Luz. They have such a good rapport. They hang out all the time. They are like the best of friends. And like why are you not going for her? Because, and you're going to be like, well, Willow is straight and stuff. No, she is pansexual. Willow is pansexual. Like, eventually she ends up with, like, a non-binary character or something that she has a crush on later and everything. But it's like, okay, whatever. But, like, these two are made for each other.
Some of these fans for this. Because, like, there's a really big Luz Amity shipping group, I think. But it's like, I'm sorry. I cannot take this couple seriously.
At least in season 1. Maybe there is something that happens later that's like, oh yeah, they were perfect for each other all along and I just didn't see it. Okay, but at least in season 1, I am like, why is this the canonical couple later? Amity is the worst.
Yeah.
And Willow is just so the best through the entire first season. Like, maybe something happens and she's
Amity almost erases Willow's memory because she doesn't want her mean girl friends to find out that her and Willow were friends when they were kids.
Yeah, she totally turns Willow's memory to pudding in one episode because she tries to erase a memory of them because she's ashamed of what she did.
Like, the episode starts with, I forget this three-eyed mean girl, I don't remember her name, and says, oh, Amity, weren't you and Willow friends once? And no, I was never friends with her. I'm a blight. I only associate with high-class witches. So she has to erase any evidence of Amity and Willow ever being friends, and it causes Willow to lose all of her memories.
Yeah, like, it's so funny because, like, there's, like, a whole... I love the way they do it because it's, like, a whole thing of, like, they're in a class, or Luz is in a class where she has to take, like, memory Polaroids of somebody's memory.
Taking out somebody's memory and looking at them, I feel that's from something else, too. That's got to be a reference.
Yeah, I know. I mean, because it's so making fun of both, like, one, how horribly invasive Hogwarts is, and two, how horribly dangerous for the students Hogwarts is.
Yeah.
Because they do this whole thing of, like, the teacher is like, yes, take your friend's memory Polaroids and put them up for the entire class to see. And it's stuff that's so embarrassing. It's like, oh, you had a bad hair year like I did. And, like, all this kind of stuff. It's just, like, all these, like, weird, embarrassing memories of Willow being, like...
But if you do anything to the pictures, it will ruin the memory.
Yeah, she's like, if you like touch the pictures wrong or anything, like, it'll erase their memory and could scramble their brain. And it's like, why are you doing this? Like, so yeah, I love it when they point out things of, like, you know, yeah, this fantasy world is horrible. Why would you be doing this to people? But yeah, and so, of course, Amity slips in and tries to burn a single picture, and then, of course, the flames get out of control and burn all of Willow's memories and turns her into, like, absolute pudding. And she's just like, hi, I'm Willow. Who's everybody else? You know. The whole point of that, though, is, like, Luz sees what a horrible person Amity is, and she still falls for her anyway, which, like...
And Amity has the cojones to call Luz the bully.
I know, right? Projection much?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I that's the only thing that really kind of annoyed me about season 1. I was like, you have this sweet little cinnamon roll who is adorable right next to you, and you're going for the bully with the bad roots? Like,
yeah, your roots are showing, Amity.
Yeah, why is that? Like, for the first couple episodes, I was like, is she wearing, like, a little, like, tiara or something? And then I was like, no, she's just got like a really bad dye job. Like, it's a magical island and you can't cover up those roots, girl. What is wrong with you?
Because we see the picture is of Amity with brown hair, and for the most of the season she has green hair.
Yeah.
So yeah, really, really bad dye job for this magical island. And of course, Willow, she's the chubby girl in glasses. So of course, passing her over for the popular skinny girl.
Yeah, it's not a good look, Luz. I mean, I'm not saying like you like what you like and everything, but it's like Amity is just the worst in this whole season. Until maybe about the Grom episode. Like, if they'd have introduced Amity in the Grom episode, you could be like, oh, that's a cute couple. But, like, everything she does up until then is kind of just awful.
Yeah, so we have Grom, which is their version of prom. And, you know, speaking of this school is horrible, there's a demon that lives in the bottom of the school that comes out once a year and will project everyone's worst fear. So the Grom king or queen has to fight the demon and calm it for another year. But that, and in the episode, it's Amity that's chosen for Grom queen, so she has to fight the Grom. But Luz steps in and said, I'll fight the Grom in your place because I know, something is bothering you. Something is you are afraid of something so traumatic that you can't face it. I'll face it. Even though Luz can barely do magic even though Luz can only do magic with her glyphs and she is nowhere near the level that Amity is. Amity even says, you're nowhere near ready with training, but we don't have any more time.
And the thing is like, if the Grom isn't defeated, it will get loose and everybody on the island will have to face their worst fear. It seems kind of important, but also I like that on this island, the Grom is basically a student sacrifice.
Yeah.
And they decide to hold a big party.
Because the principal wants to throw a party. That's really why it's a dance, because the principal wants to throw a party.
So the rest of it looks like a human prom, but just in the middle of it, a demon awakes and somebody has to go fight it. And then once that's over, they go back to the dance party.
Yeah. So they try and lose by showing her things that she's afraid of, such as human-looking animals and dude bros on the internet. Which
I like that one of the things that the demon shows Luz is a guy in a fedora saying "milady."
Yeah.
That's like, and then Luz's retort is like, "No, your
bad faith arguments."
Yeah, she's like comes back at it with like, your bad faith argument is horrible and I'm not falling for it or something like that. It's like, it's such a good line.
But her real big fear is her mother. Both in that her mother is kind of forced her to conform to normal society, and also is that she's been lying to her mother this entire time because her mother thinks she's at camp and not in another world where magic exists.
Yeah, we kind of glossed over that, but she has been using the times that Ida will open the door between worlds to go hunt for human objects to use the bits of cell service or Wi-Fi to send messages to her mom and be like, hey, camp is fine, making lots of friends, love you, and
I do like how she has her cell phone charger going out that door to the human world.
Yeah, that is kind of cool. I also love how at one point she teaches King about the internet and he uses it to watch cat videos. And he's like, yes, fight to the death. And it's just two cats being like super adorable.
But we get Amity's greatest fear is rejection. And her greatest, not just any rejection, but rejection from Luz.
Yeah, Luz doesn't see it because it shows up as like a shadowy figure being rejected by the Grom date, and Luz figures that out, but the figure never fully materializes.
Yeah, all episode long, Amity is carrying around this letter. Now you assume that she wants to give this letter to someone, and then when the Grom starts forming, she grabs the letter, the Grom grabs the letter and rips it in half.
Yeah, and so Luz only sees the part of the letter that says, will you go to Grom with me? But the audience sees the part of the letter that shows it was addressed to Luz. But, of course, the part that really got everybody talking was the fact that Luz, without understanding the full context, says, like, well, if you're afraid of rejection, then I won't reject you. You know, whoever it was, they don't matter.
I'll go to Grom with you.
I'll go to Grom with you. Let's dance. And they dance in front of the Grom, and that's what defeats the Grom, is because
they work together. They use their respective magical abilities to defeat the Grom.
Yeah, and also their fears go away because
they're together.
And, you know, Amity wasn't rejected. And it turns out she wasn't rejected by Luz, which was the real point. And Luz is, you know, in a place where she's accepted and, you know, makes her forget about the fear with her mom and, you know, the conformity and stuff. And that's what ends up defeating the Grom. But of course, this is the first major thing in the series that's like explicitly like gay. Yeah. Like,
two people do not look at each other like that without something going on.
Yeah, and also, of course, we get to see the letter as the audience that shows that Amity specifically wanted to invite Luz to prom. You know.
And for the rest of the season, anytime Amity is around Luz or Luz is mentioned, she blushes.
Yeah, and it's very obvious that she has a romantic crush on Luz. The thing is, though, is that there are hints to the queer nature of the series more throughout, because you see, like, Willow has two fathers.
Yep.
So whenever, you know, you see her parents mentioned in either flashbacks or when she gets in trouble at school or whatever, you know, it's her two dads that show up. Ida, in the episode where they do the grudge bee match, pulls out a box of personal possessions, and it has a bisexual pride rainbow on it. So, you know, it's not the most obvious thing in the world, but it is not exactly hidden. The Grom episode features several same-gender couples dancing among the crowd. Like we said, the first season, while Dana Terrace was very upfront with Disney that she wanted to put in gay themes, she wasn't sure probably how far she could push this. because this was a first season and you never know if you're going to get picked up.
Mhm.
But when they did the first season, Disney liked it so much that they went ahead and greenlit a second season before the first season had even premiered.
Which shows a lot of faith, at least in the older regime. And we've seen other shows like this DuckTales was another one. Mighty Magisters was another one, where the second season was greenlit before the first season ever aired. And then there's a regime change and all bets are off at that point.
Yeah. The thing is, they believed in it enough to even give the second season more episodes.
Yep, season 1 is 19 episodes, season 2 is 21 episodes.
So I'm sure that Dana Terrace at that point felt like, okay, we can go full tilt on this, because instead of it being like, okay, it's a one-sided crush and we had them dance a little bit and there's some Disney gay background characters, season 2 is just like, okay, Luz and Amity are a couple. That's that they're girlfriends. This is a romantic relationship. And they got more characters with more actual relationships. They introduced non-binary characters, one of which was played by a trans actor. And that character even was a romantic interest for Ida. So you have things like Ida being confirmed bisexual, Lilith, who we haven't talked about yet, but we probably will in a second, who is Ida's sister. Dana Terrace has said is aromantic and asexual. So there's representation for that community as well. Willow is pansexual. There's a character that gets introduced later on. People thought that was going to be a gay love interest for Gus. And it seems that never turned out that way. And people are still debating whether or not that was people reading into it or that was a problem with the series being cut short. I really don't know about that. I don't think Dana Terrace has ever specifically talked about that. Basically, the feeling in the fandom, from what I can tell, and from what many people pitched this series to me as, was that the creator was like, oh, you're going to cancel me? Not only is this going to be the queer series I imagined, it's going to be the queerest series you have ever seen. And just kind of went all out on as much representation as she could put in the final episodes.
And I kind of understand the online want for this show to continue, for this show to return. It seems that on every Disney social media post, there's at least one person saying, bring back the Owl House. Which kind of does get annoying because the person running the social media page does not have that power.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're just a minimum wage paid person like the rest of us, who has to put up whatever, stuff is, for the day.
If anything, the key to get the series back is to get the viewing numbers up. Like I've said before, they brought back the Proud Family. They're bringing back Phineas and Ferb. So maybe, just maybe, if the viewing numbers for the Owl House are at a certain level, that now that, Iger's back in charge or whoever, that they might consider bringing back the show. But Dana Terrace, unfortunately, is no longer at Disney as she has moved on to other projects. So that would involve her coming back to Disney to do this show.
Which, I mean, at the moment, Iger is back at Disney.
Mm-hmm.
We do not know who will replace Iger when he leaves again in a couple of years. Here's the thing. If you like a show that's on streaming, one of the best ways to get the numbers up is as you're doing stuff around the house, put that show on in the background as you're doing dishes or whatever, and just keep streaming the show.
I mean, when Disney Plus launched, that's what a lot of people were doing for stuff like X-Men and Gargoyles. And yes, they are bringing back the X-Men.
And Gargoyles.
Yeah,
So yeah, and I'm not kidding. It is a great way to get streaming numbers up. Is, as you're doing stuff around the house during the day, put that on as your background noise or whatever, as you're cleaning, as you're doing. If you love a show, put that on. Don't put on, music or whatever. Put on your favorite show that you want to get the numbers up for. It has been shown to work, honestly, for other shows that
I mean, HBO Max brought back Young Justice because people were watching that show on streaming. So don't give up hope. Don't give up hope.
The thing is like when people talk about doing campaigns and stuff, that is the way to get the streaming numbers up, is what they look at more than
Social media
who's
posts.
tweeting what hashtag or whatever. It's are you watching things on our service? So
and, sadly, that's also how they decide what shows leave streaming services.
Yeah, so if you like a show, talk your friends into doing it. Talk your, that's what it is. That's how they decide.
Since you mentioned it, let's talk about Ida and Lilith.
Yeah.
The sisters. Ida has a curse upon her that at some points randomly, usually it's after a large use of her magical abilities, she will turn into an owl demon. That's how she gets the name the Owl Lady. And she doesn't know who cursed her. She doesn't know why. She's had this curse ever since she was a teenager. And because of this, and because of her refusal to conform into a coven, she is kind of public enemy number one among the Emperor. And the lead of the Emperor's coven is Ida's sister, Lilith. So, I mean, that you have two sisters, one is a cop, one is a criminal. And Lilith has made it her mission to bring her sister in, because the Emperor has said, I will cure your sister if she joins our coven. To which Lilith has explained this to Ida several times over, and Ida is still like, nah, covens aren't my thing. I'll find my own cure for this curse.
She has a potion that she drinks to keep the curse at bay, and we find out over the season that it is not working as well as it used to. She keeps having to
take more of this potion.
Yeah, drink more and more of it to get the same effect. And it is looking like before long she will just permanently be the owl.
And she keeps on having this recurring nightmare, this memory of someone coming into her room and giving her the curse, but she can never see who this person is. All we see are these glasses. What we find out towards the end of the season is the person that cursed her was her own sister. Because while Lilith is the older sister, Ida is the better magic user. And Ida has always bested Lilith in every competition they've ever had. When they're both at Hexside, they both apply to be part of the Emperor's Coven, but there's only one free spot, so the two sisters have to duel for that one spot. Lilith, knowing that in a straight fight, she will lose against Ida, so she attempts to cheat by throwing a curse onto her sister. She believes that this is cursed it's only for one day, not knowing the ramifications. And Ida doesn't want to fight her sister, so she forfeits. She says, covens aren't my thing, you want this more, you take it. Before the curse kicks in and she turns into the Owl Lady for the first time. And Lilith has lived with this guilt for years, knowing that she was the one to put the curse on her sister. It is her fault that she is a criminal. And, it starts with them fighting. She fights it, and she just blurts it out. It was so easy to curse you. And then everything stops. And, like, sister or no sister, Ida goes for blood. And Luz starts, like, I'm going to... Granted, this is still a TVY7 show that aired on a basic cable channel, but all but said, I'm going to kill Lilith for what she did to Ida.
Oh, yeah. Luz has no chill about it.
How could you do that to your own sister? You should be up there. You should be the one in chains. You should be the one getting punished. And Lilith agrees. It should be me. It's my fault. So eventually, Lilith does capture Ida after she turns into the Owl Lady, after their big wizard duel. And with her last bit of self, she even says, I'm going to go away for a little while, because the more she uses her magic, the worse the curse gets.
Yeah, she still has a little bit of her brain left, though.
Basically, whenever there's something that reminds her of her true self, when Ida is finally captured, and Lilith tells the Emperor, you promised you heal her. I brought her to you. Please lift the curse from her. And then the Emperor goes back on it. Oh, I never planned on removing the curse from her. She's far too dangerous to be left alive. She gets the worst punishment of the worst criminals on the island, and she is petrified. She is turned to stone. Which, once turned to stone, there's no way back. Realizing, there's just that big moment, realizing that she's essentially sentenced her sister to death, is where she goes against the Emperor to get loose, to get her into position to save her sister. And it's a great. I mean, I don't want to really spoil it for someone who hasn't seen it, because it's a great two-parter. I feel like I'm giving away too much.
Yeah. Although I will say that the bit about, like, oh, Lilith is the one who cursed Ida, like, that was kind of the biggest non-twist ever.
Especially when, after they show young Lilith with glasses, and you see the person that cursed her wears glasses, you can put two and two together.
Once they introduce, like, oh, my sister is a villain, and they introduce, like, oh, I have no idea who cursed me. It's like, oh, could it be, like, your sister who's a villain? Like, I absolutely love, like, let's talk about the episode where we really find out about Lilith, though, because they go to the convention, the Coven convention.
Yeah.
And I just got to say, I absolutely adored that convention parts of that episode.
You see all the vendors of each coven, and they kind of, some of them have like really, really punny names, and there's even a cinnamon bun stand.
Yeah, but I just love King throughout that episode, because he was like, somebody says to him earlier, like, well, if you're a king, shouldn't people be giving you tribute or whatever? And then they take him along to the convention, and he's wandering around, and the covens are giving out, like, swag. And he's like, yes, give me more tribute, give me more tribute. And there's
he goes to every single coven stand just to get the swag because he needs offerings because he is the king.
Yeah, and then like the Baker's Coven keeps giving out cupcakes.
I love that it's called the Baker's Coven.
It's so good. I have to say that the background signs in this series are just the best. Every single, if somebody's wearing like a t-shirt, or if there's a coffee mug, or if there's a wanted poster in the background, or like all the little background stuff, the names of businesses, that the background artists put so much work into this show, and bless them for it, because it is so hilarious to just freeze frame this show and read all the nonsense that is in the background.
Yeah.
The thing that I like is that there are little shout outs to various things, and I also love anytime, and they do this in basically every episode, especially if they're at Hexside, where they just have to rag on Harry Potter. And those are my favorite things.
Like the sports episode.
Oh my goodness, that Grudgeby episode, which, by the way, whoever came up with the name Grudgeby, I love you forever. Please marry me. Like, that is the best sports name ever, is that their magical sport is called Grudgeby, and that it is the most ridiculous magical sport ever, because they just get out there and Willow is explaining the sport to Luz, and she's just like, here's the field, and it just looks like a normal sport playing field, and it's like grass, and it's got painted lines on it, and there's like 2 goals at the end, and she's like, you've got to get this ball through one of those goals, and the other team tries to stop you. And Luz is like, oh, that seems pretty normal. And then Willow's like, yeah, and she throws the ball out onto the field, and the field itself opens up with like teeth and traps and stuff, and tries to eat the ball. And Luz is like, oh, yeah, no, that would happen here, yeah.
I kind of wish that they didn't give the sport a name, because when we first see it, Gus is giving Luz a tour of the school and says, here's where we watch sport. And then a random thing happens, and then a goal hits, and then, yay! I kind of wish it had stayed like that. Like, it's just called sport. Something random happens to it, people clap, and it's never explained to the audience.
Well, yeah, but I also kind of like that there is only one sport on the island, which is always kind of my joke as an American, that I love that British people are always trying to teach us that there are multiple types of maths, which I can get behind, but that there is only one sport. Like, like if you watch British news, which I do, it's like, and now today's news in sport. And I'm like, which one? There's like 7,000 sports. Pick a sport and tell me which sport you're going to report on. It's not the news in sport, it's the news in sports, because there are never-ending sports, and I know this because they're always on my TV messing up my shows. So I just love that on this island there is apparently one sport, which seems like the more proper British use of the word sport. So...
Yeah, and I do love, like, Luz is trying to make this, I don't know sports, but I know sports movies.
Yeah, and so the whole thing is like, and then they do the montage bit And then at one point, Gus is like, wait, during the montage, were we having like a tea party in Animal Jammies? And she's like, what happens in the montage stays in the montage. Like,
oh, Gus, you innocent bean.
But my favorite part is that they go through the whole thing against, they're playing Grudge Bee against the Mean Girls for like, Willow's pride or whatever, but they do the thing, and then they do the whole like sports movie ending, and it's like 1 point difference, and it's like, yay, we made the final point, we won the game, and then all of a sudden the board shoots up to like 1,000 points in the other team's direction, and they're like, what? It's like, oh, we call it the golden what's it doodle, and it's like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, if you catch the golden what's it doodle, you just, win the whole game no matter what else happens. And Luz is like, that's stupid. Why would anybody do anything for the rest of the game other than just go around and try to catch that thing? It completely invalidates everything else you did during the game. Like,
yeah, that is the ultimate dig at Harry Potter.
Yeah, and I was like, thank you. Like, why would you care about anything else if there's a magic FU, we just won the game, Deus Ex, whatever, like, okay, yes, thank you. This is the dumbest thing. This is just I want my character to win, and I've written myself into a corner. What do we do? Oh, yeah, he caught the golden what's-it-doodle. Like... I was like, oh, Luz, I love you so much. Thank you for channeling my rage. Oh, so yeah, I laughed so hard at that point in the episode. I was like, I need to stop this and just go like hyperventilate into a bag for a bit with how much that made me laugh.
The craziest thing about me, and I texted you this after I saw the episode. It's like there is an episode that references a show that I never thought would get referenced in a Disney Channel cartoon, because there's a writing contest that both Luz and King enter. King wins the writing contest. His book gets published, and there's like a little advertisement that said, purchase this reading material I wrote. Purchase this reading material I wrote, which is a straight up reference to the Critic episode. Buy my book.
Buy my book. Yes, I love it. I loved it so much. I was like, oh, this is so good. Yeah, I know. I didn't expect that one either. I was like, oh, wow. But yeah, you and I are both down for a Critic reference because we both love that show so much.
I mean, it did air. I mean, I don't know who owns it right now. It probably Disney.
Actually, Disney owns it right now because it aired on Fox.
True.
That was a Fox show, so it's probably owned by Disney now. Critic references will always make the two of us laugh the hardest.
Like, there are these weird references that you would never expect in a freaking Disney Channel kids cartoon.
Yeah, they get away with so much stuff in this, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is kind of weird, specific, just for me kind of references.
It's like when we said with Clone Wars, like, this is a kid's show.
Yeah, the funny thing about it is, like, the fact that Ida can just like dismember parts of her body at random is also a little, I wouldn't have expected on a Disney Channel show. But she's constantly just like taking off one of her hands and using it as a book stand, like.
I think the first episode they cut her head off, and it's like, you saw my head come off earlier, it's fine.
Yeah. But at various points, she's just like, Luz is like, Ida, give me a hand. And it's just like a hand will just fly into frame, like. But At one point, Luz like brings Ida a glove, and she's like, "I found your glove and also your hand." It's like, but can we talk about some of the actual downright stuff that we've talked about before on the show, things that gave us nightmares as kids? And some of this stuff, I'm like, kids watching this today are probably going to grow up with nightmares about some of this stuff. Like,
the Bat Queen is a sleep paralysis demon, and I will hear nothing else of it.
Okay, yeah. And she's also voiced by Isabella Rossellini, which, that was a get.
Yeah.
But, yeah, the Bat Queen is kind of awesome. And then finding out how the Bat Queen started was kind of... I hope that at some point in the show they tell whose palisman she was.
I mean, it's... Yeah, I don't even want to guess because I'm going to get it... Because they're going to be Owl House fans that say, no, that's not how it goes.
Yeah. I don't want to make any guesses either. I have a few theories in my head, but I don't want to make a guess. But I hope that they do tell us. But the... Like, I love her and I love her babies.
Yeah.
So adorable. But I was going to talk about the detention.
Oh, yeah.
Because even as an adult, I was like, oh, I'm going to have nightmares about that tonight. Like, because detention for this school is like a literal dungeon. And then there's a demon or something in there that grabs the kids and puts them in like body snatchers type pods
and convinces them to be good students.
Yeah, it's a brainwashing system that convinces them to be good students. And Gus got put in it for a short period of time before, or no, not Gus, but one of the other kids.
Gus's little rival.
Yeah, Gus's little rival for the president of the Human Appreciation Club. Yeah. But we see one kid come out of it after just a minute or two in there. And when he came out of it, he was like, I will be a good student. I will be a good... he was totally out of it. And we see kids that have been in there for who knows how long. And it's absolutely terrifying. It's also a little terrifying that Luz and Gus are like, nobody gets left behind. And then they only save that one kid.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, so apparently nobody is the kid we know the name of.
Kids with lines only.
Yeah. SAG-AFTRA members only. Everybody else gets left behind. It's not very solidarity of you guys. The thing is, though, is that is one of the more terrifying aspects of the school. They also have their own version of Dementors that start roaming the school at one point, which they can smell trouble. And they will immediately take you to detention if they smell that you're going to start trouble. So it's sort of like a pre-crime thing.
Yeah, especially Luz, who has been banned from the school, but this is before she starts, for causing mayhem the first time. And then Gus brings her in because he wants to prove that he has an actual expert on human things to the Human Appreciation Society. And since she's banned in the school, she's automatically trouble.
Yeah, which is how they end up in detention. But it's very much a pre-crime kind of idea, It's
if you even think about doing something bad, they will come after you.
Yeah. Yeah, we do find out later that there are other nonconformist kids that have escaped into the walls of the school. There's like a different sort of detention
Because the first one got wrecked by Luce.
Yeah, and that one is more traditionally what we would think of as detention in the real world, where they kind of have to sit there and write phrases and, be looked over by a teacher who drew the short straw and would rather just nap or, play video games or whatever.
But it's a year-long detention. Like, you are not allowed to learn any magic in this detention.
Yeah. But the teacher keeps falling asleep, so they sneak into the walls and they've discovered a series of portal doors to the rest of the school.
If only there was some sort of map that could tell you all of these secret doors. Some sort of marauder something?
Yeah. But those students have learned that by being put in detention, they're actually free of the system, because they can sneak around the school and listen into all of the different classes and take whatever magic they want. So they've actually been learning more magic than
any of the other students.
Because they're not locked into one magic track anymore. And so instead of being the worst students in school, they're the best students in school, because they really want to learn magic, and they were only put into detention because they were trying to learn more than one magic track.
I do like how one of them says, "I think I like school a little too much."
Yeah. And that was their crime, was that they wanted to learn more than one type of magic, and that was forbidden. And so that was their crime, that was literally their crime, was liking school too much.
And then they end up saving the school from a magic devourer, and as reward, the principal actually allows them to be in more than one magic track at one time.
Yay, multi-classing in a very literal sense. And he allows Luz to take all the tracks, so she gets the uniform of many colors, which I actually like. That'd be a great cosplay. I kind of want to do that. And
you already have the hair.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have short hair, but her hair isn't really the same color as mine.
It is in the carnival episode. She passes by the one funhouse mirror that makes it look anime.
Yeah. When she has the anime hair, she does kind of have my hair. Yeah. The thing is, though, is that her from then on, she's able to just take whatever classes she wants from any track, which is kind of cool, because we do see all the various kind of tracks that they have. So it's really fascinating to watch. But it is another, all of these things are things about breaking conformity and breaking out against these authoritarian systems.
Which the irony of this show being canceled because it didn't conform to what they wanted the network to be.
Yeah. And especially because it's so much about wanting knowledge, and especially about queer people specifically wanting knowledge.
Knowledge that is forbidden to them.
At a time when that is coming up so much. Mm-hmm. It ended up being a little too uncomfortably prescient. But, we get to that point where you find out that the Emperor really wants the Owl Lady less because he hates that she's not conforming, and more because she's the one with the key to the door to the human world.
And the Emperor straight up tells Luz, if you think I want to go to the human world and conquer it, I don't think that's small.
Yeah, at the end of season 1, we still do not know exactly what the Emperor is planning. All we know is that it is not good.
And it involves entering the human world.
Or at least having a door to the human world.
And we see that once Luz returns to the human world, when she's fighting Lilith, that her magic no longer works.
Yeah, Lilith seems to be able to use her magic because her staff still works. But Luz is not able to use glyph magic back in the human world. There is a small problem that I do not like. There is a moment during the fight with Lilith where Ida is about to be petrified and turned into a statue for the glory of the Emperor to prove, conformity works, yay. And Ida, in her kind of last moment of lucidity, gives the key to Luz, and she's like, look, I'm sorry I got you into all this. Hey, I escaped this fate for a long time. Finally caught up with me. Oh well. But you need to get out of here. You should have never been pulled into this. Go home.
And destroy the door.
And destroy the door, because if he wants the door, he can't have it. Whatever it is bad. Luz doesn't want to leave, but it's like, okay, he wants the door, whatever. And Lilith gets there before she can go through the door. They fall through the door, and they're back in the human world for a second. Luz has that moment of, do I run back into the magic world? Because Lilith is like, no, I just want to help Ida. Like, Lilith has that moment of like, I just want to help my sister. I'm not actually trying to kill her.
And Luz has that choice, because she knows if she goes back in that door, she's not coming back.
Yeah.
And then she says, I'm sorry, Mom.
Yeah, but here's the thing for me. Like, okay, she has that moment, and that she's like, okay, I'm gonna miss my mom. All right. But she's looking around like wistful at the trees and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, the human world's got some stuff that's kind of cool, like I like Fruity Pebbles and stuff, but like literally you're a powerful witch on the other side of that door. Like every single fantasy series seems to do this, and I don't know why. Like, yeah. I can understand missing people. And I can understand occasionally going like, oh man, I really miss like my favorite food or something.
Mm-hmm. Or my favorite show.
Or my favorite TV show or whatever. But like, or like, I miss puppies or something. Like, okay, I can understand saying that, but it's like, why in every single one of these fantasy world things does a person end up in a place where they are arguably better off? And then there's always a moment where they end up back in the crappy ass real world, and they're like, oh, I'm so wistful for the crappy ass real world. Do I want to go back to the cool, awesome place where I have magical powers? Or do I want to stay in the crappy ass real world and eat cereal and watch cartoons? Like, I like cereal. I like cartoons. I'm sitting here doing a podcast about cartoons, which I did eat cereal while watching. But if on the other side of that door was a magical world where I got to cast fire spells like bad guys, I'm going to the magical world where I can cast fire spells at bad guys. I do not know why this is a choice. Would I miss my friends? Sure. You guys are cool. But if on the other side of that door is a magical world where I get to cast fire spells and bad guys, bye! You're never seeing me again.
And that's right at the first episode. Like, right at the end of the first episode, Ida gives her the choice. I brought you here. I'm going to take you home. Go through the door and go home. And Lou says, no. I finally find somewhere where I feel like I belong. I'm going to stay here.
Well, but at the time, she's like, having fun time at summer camp or whatever. Like, I literally think she was like, I'm going to stay here for a while and be at summer camp where I can do magic.
And she brings that up again in the school episode where she's put in detention and saying, well, you can try again next year. Well, next year I'll be back in the human world.
Honestly, she's lived there long enough that other than a few problems, one of which, like I said, I've watched like 2 or 3 episodes into season 2, and Edith says something about like there's not a lot of stuff that a human stomach can digest here. So she has like a limited diet and stuff. Like, it's not that there aren't drawbacks to being there for a human, but they don't seem to be like insurmountable drawbacks other than the authoritarian government that is trying to, put you in the conformatorium all the time. Mm-hmm. Which, let's be honest, probably going to happen here within the next couple of months. So, like, really, fire magic at bad guys or real world.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like, I understand that they're trying to like add some pathos and whatever, but it's like, okay, yes, you miss your mom. I understand that. That is a legitimate emotional point, which we have been talking about. Mm-hmm. But it didn't look like she had any friends. It didn't really look like she had any other things to go back to. It's like, mom was kind of it. That was like her one grounding point in real world. But on the Boiling Isles, it's like lots of friends, community, like that is her actual life. Mm-hmm. So I hate to say it, and yes, she goes back and she makes the choice and stuff, and all, but that is a thing. I think we've got to stop making out to be such a difficult, horrific choice or whatever.
I think it's also a situation of the symbolism of growing up, that at some point you have to put the fantasy behind you and then live in the real world, which even that is BS, because we've seen people our own age or older that still are into the fantasy stuff.
But the thing is that I'm gonna put it this way. It's not a fantasy. If all of a sudden it pulled back and it's just Luz is standing in the middle of a field being like, I'll save you, owl lady, and, she's made like a sculpture out of feathers or whatever, then yeah, she's living in a fantasy world. But in the context of the show, this is a real place. Okay? These are real creatures, real beings, real sentient thing, So it's no less real than the human world. They even say that in the first episode that the world of the Boiling Isles and this portal between it is why the human world has tales of witches and demons and all that other kind of stuff.
Giraffes.
Yeah, giraffes. Is that all of that stuff came from either people finding their way onto the Boiling Isles and then going home with fantastical stories, or creatures from the Boiling Isles wandering through the door and then going back to the Boiling Isles. It is a real place. It's just not a place that's easily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be like, oh, well, she's living a fantasy or whatever, because in the context of the show, it's an actual place. It's like, well, you can't just move to Bermuda or whatever. It's like, well, you can. It's like it's a real place. So I want them to say, like, yes, there are things that you have to give up. It's like in a story where it's like, well, I've moved from one place to another place on the earth. Yes, you might miss certain things about the place that you moved from when you move to, but it's a choice. You always give up something to go somewhere else. And you can have like wistfulness or like, oh, I'm sorry, or oh, I'll write you, or oh, I hope I see you again. But you've always got to make that choice for your own self and where you think you're going to be better and where you think you're going to be able to do the most good. And I just hate when they do that in these kind of quote unquote fantasy stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, well, I found out this other place exists and I actually do fit in better there. But, the other place is the quote unquote real world. I was like, no, it's not any more real than the place you were just at. And I'm sick of it being a metaphor for like growing up or what it's like. So I kind of hate that they even did that moment, because I think the point of the show is like the same queer idea of found family that most queer people have to deal with. Like, so many queer people, their actual family doesn't really get them. And so they have to go find a queer family that does. I don't think it's an accident that when Luz ends up on the Boiling Isles, pretty much everybody she ends up befriending is some form of LGBT, Because that's kind of what ends up happening to a lot of us, is that we end up finding that community and suddenly you're like, wait, is everybody I know some form of queer, And it's because it's just kind of how it happens, is that most of your friend group are also weirdos who were trying to find their place. And that's what happens to Luz, is that most of her friend groups were weirdos who were trying to find their place. And that's not to knock Luz's mom. Because I don't think Luz's mom is a bad character in any way. That is the start of her journey, is that she feels like her mom didn't understand her.
And her mom was literally going to send her to conversion camp.
I think I've heard it got better, and that her mom is like technically a very accepting character, over the course of the show. But in season 1, we see her mom for one episode at the beginning for like 5 minutes, and then we never see her again except in text messages.
And she texts him saying, "I love receiving your letters." So she's getting letters from somebody.
Yeah.
Granted, yes, this is going to get this is going to get answered in season 2. I have not seen season 2 yet.
Yeah, and even what couple episodes I have, I do not know who is sending letters, so that's still a mystery. Dum dum dum.
We might come back to this and just do an episode on season 2.
Yeah, finish up season 2 and 3,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, I just this has been really interesting because it's like there is that bit of, you know, you go, they do the, you know, they go back, you know, Luz goes back and ends up having that great moment with the emperor where she's like, all right, you want the door, I want the owl lady, let's make a trade. And the emperor's like, all right. And he's like, but you know, you're gonna lose. And she's like, it doesn't matter if he's like, you know, you're not gonna win. She's like, I don't have to win, we just both have to lose.
And you see the glyphs right on her. She put the glyphs on the door and it burns it, and it's like the sacrifice play.
Yeah, I mean, technically he did get the door for a second.
And we do see at the right before the end credits that he's rebuilding the door.
The thing is, though, is that we also see Lilith make the sacrifice play because they're able to break the little petrification thing before it turns Ida to stone, so she's okay from that sense, but she's still cursed.
She's stuck in the owl lady form.
Yeah, and Lilith does a spell that we saw in a flashback that she did when they were kids, which is that she can share Ida's pain by transferring the wound to herself. And she does that and diminishes the curse so that
Lilith
it curses them both. Yeah.
But it also erases their magic.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't erase it fully, but it definitely takes them down to very, very little strength. And so now neither of them really have the ability to use magic to any real degree. So, you know, and now Lilith has made herself the Emperor's enemy.
Yeah, she's a criminal now too.
It is really, really interesting how they kind of play that for the sisters reuniting, you know? That you find out that Lilith really does love Ida. And that it was just her desire to be a part of a prestigious coven that caused her to make a lot of really bad choices.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, collaborators never prosper.
Mm.
So Lilith learns that the extremely hard way.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a well-written storyline, at least through the first season, and it leaves a lot of questions open that make you keep wanting to watch. At least me. And all of the characters are interesting, including a lot of the background characters we didn't even have time to get to.
Yeah.
Amity's parents are horrific and fascinating, as are her brother and sister.
Yeah.
We didn't even get into the library episode where they talk Luz into helping to steal Amity's diary, which is just some sort of evil.
Yeah, they want the diary so they can humiliate her in the school because they believe their sister needs to be taken down a peg.
Yeah, I mean, what an awful family.
Yeah.
You know, all of the side characters at the school that you see come in and out, those characters that you meet in the conformatorium in the first episode keep coming back at various points.
I mean, one even becomes King's biggest fan after he wins the writing competition.
Yeah.
Can you read my story?
Yeah. The one that keeps writing fanfic about vegetables. Yeah.
I mean, we really haven't really talked about Gus. Granted, Gus doesn't have a lot of character development in the show, at least in the first season.
Yeah, in the first season, I hear he gets like way more as the show goes on, but in the first season, he's kind of just the sidekick that's really into human things, but always gets it wrong. You know, it's very much a joke on like Ariel in The Little Mermaid. You know, this is a dingle hopper, and it's used to, you know, comb your hair or whatever. You know, it's that kind of thing, and Luz either goes along with it because it makes her laugh, or gently corrects him because he's using things dangerously or something, you know. He's generally well-meaning, but, you know, his dad is the local newsman, and he worries about getting in trouble, and, you know.
Mm-hmm. There's a funny moment here where, because Gus uses illusion magic. And he uses illusion magic to cut class. But it's like, you know, if you're with me, then who's in class with you? Oh, that's my illusion. He's taking notes for me. And then the illusion turns around saying, I'm not taking notes. And then Gus kind of does the slit throat motion at him, kind of threatening him. I will end you if you don't do what I do. So kind of showing that Gus has a bit of a dark side.
Yeah. But I also love like how into cheering on the sports team Gus is, but really just so he can wave his flags.
Yeah.
You know, like which becomes a running joke.
He's completely out of the game once his flag breaks. He has flags. These flags are hooked up to IVs.
Yeah. It's super adorable, you know, the friendship between the three of them.
And, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the episode where King gets jealous of that friendship.
Yeah, and King tries to, like, shrink Willow and Gus down so they'll be eaten by creatures in the little sideshow.
He wants Luz also himself.
It's really, you know, there's some cute side moments that just don't really feed into the main plot, you know.
But they're nice character moments.
They are good character moments. I never felt while I was watching the first season that anything was wasted time.
Yeah, granted, most people will refer to these as filler, but I don't think there's a single filler episode in here because everything feeds into something else.
Yeah, and even the stuff that you think is filler kind of comes back later.
As major key points, yeah.
Yeah, either in a big way or a small. Nothing seems forgotten, which is kind of what makes the show so hard to talk about when you're trying to sell other people on it, you know?
Yeah.
But honestly, I was easily sold on this by the end of the first episode. If for some reason you've been listening to this and you haven't watched it yet, honestly, just watch the first episode, and if you're not sold by the end of the first episode, then probably not the show for you, but I can't imagine how anybody would not be sold on it by the end of the first episode. I was immediately hooked.
Yeah, it's an easy watch. I mean, these are 22-minute episodes, but they go by really fast.
Yeah, it's a super easy binge, and it doesn't overstay its welcome in that way. Like, none of the episodes felt like a slog. The pacing is very good, and it keeps, you know, the story keeps going along in a way that makes you constantly engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So I always felt like I wanted to be watching it. Some of the stuff we watched for this, it's like, oh my goodness, get over this already, or like, oh, you needed an editor for that. I never felt like that watching the Owl House. Yeah. And in fact, like you said, we ended up watching more for this than we intended to.
We were just going to cover Luce and Amity. That was all we were going to plan to cover, but we got so into this show, we have to talk about all of season 1.
Yeah, we were like, okay, no, screw it. We're watching all of season 1. This is too good. So yeah, no, let's ask the question, even though I think we've already answered it.
Kiki, does the Owl House have the magic?
Yes, yes, glyph magic, natural magic, all of the magic.
Absolutely. Definitely has the magic in more ways than one. This is definitely worth the watch. I understand. Owl House fans, I understand.
We grok you now. Yes.
Yes.
We're sorry it took us so long.
I understand why you want this show back. I understand. I get it. I want it back, and I've only seen the first season.
Yeah, we're I think both of us are at the point where like we're definitely finishing the rest of this series now.
I definitely want to do an episode on season 2 and season 3 at some point later on, but yeah, like and I'm so mad that there's no merchandise for this.
Yeah, I immediately was like, must have King plushie, must have like 17 different mugs that I've seen Ida use during this.
You would totally rock the over 30 and flirty mug.
Well, actually, the one that I want is she has in one early episode, and it says like #1 bad girl or something. Like I really want that mug. Like that's the mug I want.
Or the one that King uses, World's Greatest Me.
Yeah, that one I might get for someone else. But yeah, that's a good mug.
But yeah, it's like I kind of want to go on Etsy and see what people have come up with the show, because there's a million people on Etsy who are making Owl House merchandise because Disney didn't.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the thing that I do after we finish recording, is probably just spend a night on Etsy looking at random stuff.
All right, so yeah, definitely highly recommend the Owl House. I'm sorry it took us this long. I understand all of your worries and your complaints and your concerns. I get it, but I'm still going to say that it should have been Luce and Willow.
Yeah, that might change as we go through the series, but as of season 1, Luce and Willow.
Yeah. So let's move on to next week. Kiki, there's a new Indiana Jones movie coming out, and they say that this is the last one. So we're going to go back to the first time they said this is going to be the last Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
Yay! It's time to punch some Nazis, everybody.
So come back this week for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and we'll talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Happy Pride.
Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic.
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic.
And of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun,
but there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area. Is that good, or do you want to do a third round?
I think we can do that, and you can piece it together from the two.
All right, that sounds good. Let's stop the recording.